No one expected it. Not Amy. Not Jack. Not even the fans who had mourned his death for years. But in Season 19, Episode 1 of Heartland, something unbelievable happens. Ty Borden walks back into the story. Alive. Breathing. Real. For years, Amy had learned to live with his memory, raising their daughter Lindy and holding on to the strength he gave her. But now, all of that is shaken. A ghost becomes flesh. A love story thought to be over is suddenly given a new chapter. How is this possible? What really happened? And why is Amy the last to know? Life at Heartland had slowly returned to a sense of peace. Amy was still the strong, quiet soul she had always been, but the light in her eyes had dimmed since Ty's death. The barn still echoed with memories. Every nail, every wooden beam, every path she walked with her horses reminded her of the man she loved. Yet, she smiled more now. She had begun to move on, not by forgetting, but by learning to live with the grief. Her days started early, as usual, tending to the horses, training new rescues, and helping others with their troubled animals. Lindy was growing fast, with her father's spirit alive in her eyes. The little girl would ask questions, curious ones, about her dad. Amy always answered with love but often fought back tears. Life, though different, had a rhythm again. Lou was focused on her mayor duties, and Jack kept everyone grounded like always. Everything seemed to be moving forward. Then, small things began to change. It started with strange signs. A man was seen on the edge of the property one early morning. Caleb mentioned he thought he saw someone near the woods, but didn't think much of it. Amy brushed it off too, thinking it might be a neighbor or a traveler. But her heart, some deep, buried part of it, started to ache in a way she hadn't felt in years. One day, as she was brushing a horse in the main barn, she heard a noise behind her. A quiet step. Soft, but certain. She turned quickly, but no one was there. Still, she felt like someone had just been watching her. Amy laughed nervously and shook her head. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe her mind was playing tricks on her. But deep inside, something felt different. The next evening, Jack found an old, worn-out jacket hanging on a post by the trail. It was covered in dust, clearly left there for days. But it looked familiar. Very familiar. Jack didn't say anything to Amy right away, but he kept the jacket with him, unsure what to think. That night, he stared at it for hours. There was a name tag inside. It read, Ty Borden. Jack's hands trembled elsewhere. Amy dreamed of Ty again, but this time, it didn't feel like a dream. She felt his hand in hers. Heard his voice calling her name. When she woke up, her eyes were wet, and her heart was racing. Then came the moment that shattered everything. Amy was in the barn alone, brushing Storm, when the door creaked open behind her. She didn't look up right away. She thought it was Jack or Lou coming to talk. But when she turned, everything inside her froze. There he was. Standing. Breathing. Watching her with those familiar, kind eyes. Ty. Amy dropped the brush in her hand. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her body moved back instinctively, as if her mind couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her voice finally escaped in a whisper, "No, it can't be." But it was, and this was just the beginning. Amy didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood there, frozen in place, her eyes locked on the man she had buried in her heart years ago. Ty didn't speak at first either. He looked just as shocked to see her, as if he had also wondered whether this moment was even real. The silence between them was heavy, filled with love, confusion, and pain. Then, slowly, Ty took a step forward. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice trembling. Amy's knees weakened. She leaned on the stall door behind her, struggling to stay upright. She couldn't understand what was happening. She had seen him die. She had mourned him. She had stood by his grave and promised to raise their daughter strong and kind like him. How could this be? Still shaking, Amy asked, How are you here?" Ty looked down, his face showing guilt, sorrow, and deep weariness. I didn't die that day, Amy. But I had to disappear. The truth unraveled slowly. Ty explained that the shooting wasn't just a random act. It had been part of something darker, something dangerous. Someone had been targeting him. After he was rushed to the hospital, the authorities stepped in. They discovered a criminal network involved in illegal animal trafficking and black market operations, one that Ty had unknowingly crossed while helping a friend. The gunman was connected to them. To protect Ty and everyone he loved, the police made a decision. Ty was declared dead and secretly moved into protective custody under a new identity. He had to vanish, with no contact, no trace. They told him Amy and Lindy would be safe only if he stayed away. And so he did. Amy's face was pale. You let me believe you were dead. All these years, you let me grieve alone. I wanted to come back every single day, Ty said, his voice breaking. Every single minute, Amy. But they made it clear, if I did, they would come after you, and Lindy. His hands were clenched now, his face filled with years of hidden pain. I watched you from far away sometimes. Just to know you were okay. I saw Lindy walk for the first time, from the trees behind the ridge. I was there when you broke down by the lake. I was there when you smiled again. And every time, it tore me apart. Amy's tears finally fell. She didn't know whether to be angry, relieved, or heartbroken all over again. Her world had shifted. Everything she believed, the grief, the healing, the years she spent finding peace, all of it was now tangled in a truth that felt like a lie. But why now? She asked. Why come back now? Ty looked into her eyes. Because they're gone. The threat is over. The men behind it were caught 6 months ago. And the only thing I've wanted since then is to come home. Amy stood silently for a moment, and then whispered, home never felt the same without you. And just like that, the distance between them began to close, not with steps, but with the heavy weight of everything they had survived. But what comes next? Rebuilding love after death is not simple. And Amy's heart, it may never be the same again. Jack Bartlett had always been the rock of Heartland. He had buried many things in his life, friends, family, and most painfully, the man he considered a grandson. But nothing prepared him for the moment Ty Borden walked into the house, alive and real. Jack had just poured his morning coffee when the door creaked open. He turned, expecting Lou or Tim. Instead, he dropped the cup, the mug shattered on the floor, but Jack didn't flinch. His eyes locked onto the man in front of him. For a full 10 seconds, no one said a word, then Jack spoke, his voice low and tight. You have 5 seconds to tell me this isn't some cruel trick. Ty stepped forward. It's me, Jack. I'm sorry. Jack's hand trembled. This was the man he held while he cried as a teen, the man he taught to ride, to fight for his future. He had grieved Ty like a son. Now that same man stood in front of him with blood still in his veins. Jack didn't embrace him. Not yet. His face was tight with pain and fury. You broke her, Jack said, almost growling. You broke Amy when you left. Ty's eyes filled with regret. I didn't have a choice. I had to keep them safe. I hated myself every day I stayed away. Meanwhile, Lou rushed into the kitchen, drawn by the commotion. She froze in the doorway. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She blinked twice, stepped forward slowly, and then slapped Ty hard across the face. You don't get to walk back into our lives like this. She shouted through tears. You don't get to make us believe you were dead. Ty took the slap without protest. He didn't even lift his hand to his cheek. Lou fell into Jack's arms, sobbing. The betrayal, the confusion, it overwhelmed her. Moments later, Tim barged in, confused by the shouting. When he saw Ty, he nearly collapsed. What the hell is going on? He muttered. Amy had followed Ty in quietly. Her presence calmed the storm a little. She stepped between her family and the man they thought they lost. Her voice was soft but steady. He didn't die, she said. He was taken into protection. He stayed away to keep us safe. There was a long silence after that. A silence. Full of pain, of questions no one could ask yet. Of wounds reopened just when they were starting to heal. Lindy peeked from behind the stairway. Her small voice floated into the tension. Mama? Who's that? Amy turned, her heart nearly stopping. She hadn't thought about this moment yet, how to explain to their daughter that the man from the pictures, the bedtime stories, the grave, was suddenly real. Ty knelt down, tears in his eyes. I'm someone very special to you, Lindy. The little girl tilted her head and looked at him with quiet wonder. Then she asked, Are you my daddy? Ty nodded, overwhelmed with emotion. Yes. I am. Lindy walked to him slowly and hugged him without fear. As if some part of her soul had always known who he was. It was too much for Lou, who turned and left the room. Tim followed her. Jack still didn't say another word, but his eyes lingered on Ty. With a storm behind them, Amy gently placed a hand on Ty's shoulder. They need time, she whispered. So do I. Ty nodded, holding his daughter in his arms, the weight of all those lost years crushing him. This wasn't the happy return he had dreamed of. This was a new beginning, carved from the rubble of heartbreak, but beginnings are messy. And the road to healing had only just begun. Ty sat on the old wooden bench just outside the barn, the evening light wrapping Heartland in soft gold. Lindy sat beside him, swinging her small legs, holding a flower she'd picked for him. It had only been a few hours since she learned he was her father, and yet, she didn't seem scared or confused. Children have a way of sensing truth before words can explain it. But for Ty, the moment was bittersweet. He had imagined this day so many times. He pictured carrying her on his shoulders, brushing her hair, telling her stories. But he wasn't there for her first words, her scraped knees, her nightmares. He didn't tuck her in or hold her when she cried. And now, sitting beside his own daughter, he felt both joy and guilt crushing his chest. Do you like horses, Daddy? She asked, her voice so gentle it nearly broke him. I love horses, Ty smiled. Maybe you can show me your favorite one tomorrow? She nodded happily. Storm. He listens to me. Amy stood nearby, watching the two of them from a distance. Her heart was torn in two. She wanted to wrap Ty in her arms and never let go. But another part of her still couldn't trust what she saw. He had died. She had buried that version of him. And now, he was here. Breathing. Laughing with their child. It felt like a dream stitched together from every broken memory. That night, Amy lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her mind played every moment over and over. Ty's face, his voice. The way he had looked at Lindy. Her emotions twisted like a knot. Could she love him again? Did she even know him anymore? Was he still the same man, or just a stranger who wore her husband's face? Down the hall, Ty was given the guest room. Jack hadn't spoken to him again. Lou hadn't come back. Tim said nothing but gave a hard look as he passed him in the kitchen earlier. It would take time, if it ever came at all, but with Lindy, something new was growing, something honest and unshaped by the past. The next day, Ty joined Amy and Lindy for morning chores. He didn't try to take over. He just walked beside them, asking Lindy questions and listening to Amy's soft instructions. When Storm acted up, Lindy spoke to the horse like a natural, and Ty smiled with proud tears in his eyes. She's just like you, he whispered. Amy didn't answer. But for a brief moment, her hand brushed his when they both reached for the same bridle. They paused. Their eyes met. And something passed between them, familiar, but distant. A warmth covered in scars. Later, Lindy handed Ty a drawing. It showed the three of them, stick figures, smiling. You can keep it, she said proudly. So you don't forget us again. Ty knelt, pulling her into a hug, his voice cracking. I won't. Never again. But Amy stood in the doorway, eyes wet, heart uncertain. Ty was back. But was she ready to let him back in? Not just into her home, but into her heart, at dinner. The family sat around the table for the first time since Ty's return. The room felt stiff. Lou avoided eye contact. Jack spoke little. Tim stared at his food. But Lindy, without knowing the weight of the silence, filled the space with stories and laughter. She talked about her doll, her pony rides, and how her new daddy helped her carry hay, and slowly, as dessert came around, Jack finally lifted his eyes. "You staying long?" he asked, voice flat. Ty met his gaze. "As long as you'll let me." Jack nodded once, cold, but not closed. It wasn't peace. But it was a start. Amy stood alone by the riverbank, where the water whispered softly against the rocks and the wind tugged gently at her hair. This was where she and Ty once shared quiet mornings, where he had once kissed her forehead and promised a forever they both believed in. Now, she stood in that same spot, staring at the reflection of a woman who no longer knew what forever meant. Ty was alive, but so much had died. For days now, he had been around Heartland. Helping with chores. Fixing old fences. Laughing with Lindy. Trying to fit into a life that had gone on without him. And Amy had watched him. Not just with her eyes, but with every bruised part of her heart. She saw the familiar way he smiled, the kindness in his hands, the way he always offered to carry the heavier burden, even when no one asked, but she also saw the distance in him. The shadow that followed him everywhere. The pain behind his eyes. That he tried to hide from everyone, including her. This wasn't the same Ty who left her with dreams of a long life together. This was a man who had seen too much, lost too much, and come home with the pieces of his soul rearranged. Amy sat on the ground, knees to her chest, and whispered to herself, "Why does love have to hurt this much?" That evening, Ty found her. In the barn. The silence between them was deep. Not angry, but fragile. "I remember this place like a dream," he said, leaning on the wooden post. "It's exactly the same. But everything's changed." Amy didn't look at him. She kept brushing the horse in front of her. "You don't get to walk back in and expect things to be how they were." "I know," he said quietly. "I don't want to erase what you've been through. I miss who we were." Amy stopped brushing. "Who we were is gone, Ty. I built myself back piece by piece after you left. I had to. For Lindy. For me. I don't even know if I'm the same woman anymore." He stepped closer. "You are. You're stronger. Braver. And I see it every time you look at our daughter." Amy turned to face him now. Her voice cracked. "But do you still see me? Or are you just chasing the past?" Ty looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered in the world. "I see you, Amy. I see the girl who tamed wild horses and healed broken ones. The woman who taught me how to love. And the mother who never gave up." Her eyes filled with tears. "And I see a man who let me believe he was dead." Ty nodded. "I did. And I live with that every single day." They stood there, inches apart. Both of them wounded. Both of them still in love. But love, they now knew, wasn't always enough. It needed trust. Time. And healing. That night, Amy sat beside Lindy's bed as her daughter slept peacefully. She stared at her little face, so full of hope. Lindy had accepted Ty with no fear, no question. Children love with open hearts. Could she do the same? Amy returned to the guest room. Ty was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I can't promise anything," she said. "But I'm willing to see where this goes. For Lindy. For us." Ty stood, not touching her, but standing close enough that she could feel his breath. "That's all I could ever ask." She nodded once. "Don't disappear again. Not even for a second." He smiled softly. "Never." They didn't kiss. They didn't hold each other. But for the first time since he returned, Amy let the door to her heart open, just a little. And sometimes, that's all love needs to start again. Just when the air at Heartland began to feel light again, a dark cloud crept back over the ranch, quiet, slow, and dangerous. Ty had returned, yes, but so had the questions. And not just from the family. The outside world was starting to notice. It began with a strange truck parked near the highway entrance. Jack noticed it one morning while feeding the cattle. The truck didn't belong to anyone local. It was black, windows tinted, and didn't move for nearly 2 hours. When Jack walked toward it, it drove off slowly, leaving nothing behind but a cold trail of suspicion. Later that evening, Lou received a message from an unknown number. "How well do you really know the man who came back from the dead?" She froze, reading it over and over. Her stomach dropped. Lou had forgiven Ty, at least on the surface, for Amy's sake, for Lindy. But deep down, trust had been hard. And now this message planted something ugly in her heart, fear across the yard. Ty was working with Spartan, brushing his coat and talking to him like old times. Amy watched from a distance. There was peace in Ty's hands again, a rhythm to his presence. He was doing everything right, helping with chores, waking up early, even sitting with Jack in silence just to share coffee. But Amy could tell something had changed. Ty was restless at night. She heard him pacing. Heard him muttering in his sleep. Heard him open windows just to look out at the tree line. As if he was waiting for someone. One night, Amy asked him, "Is there something you haven't told me?" Ty didn't answer right away. He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his hands together. Finally, he said, "There were people I trusted in the program. But someone betrayed me. That's how those men found me in the first place. Before the faked death, before protection. I was being hunted." Amy's heart pounded. "And now?" "I thought it was over," he whispered. "But I think they know I'm back." She sat beside him, trying to stay calm. "Then we go to the police. We don't hide." Ty nodded. "I won't run again. But I need to keep you and Lindy safe." The next day, Lou showed Amy the message she had received. At first, Amy was furious. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to scare you," Lou said. "But Amy, are you sure Ty's telling us everything?" Amy wanted to scream. Wanted to say yes. Wanted to defend him. But the truth was, she didn't know for sure. Ty had been gone for years. Changed. And even now, some parts of his life were locked away behind his eyes. As night fell, Jack stepped outside and found fresh footprints by the barn, ones that didn't belong to any of them. He followed them to the fence, where a wire had been cut and left hanging loose. Jack came into the house, set his rifle by the door, and looked at Ty with a seriousness that shook the room. "If trouble's coming," he said, "we're not hiding. Not this time." Ty nodded. "I won't let anyone hurt this family again. Not now. Not ever." Outside, the night was too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before a storm. Amy stood at the window holding Lindy close. She didn't know what was coming. She only knew one thing. She had already lost Ty once, she would not lose him again. The storm came without thunder. No crashing skies, no wild winds. Just the silent, creeping presence of men who thought they could finish what they started years ago. But they didn't know what Heartland had become. This wasn't just a ranch. It was home. It was family. And family fights back. It happened just past midnight. Jack was the first to hear it, a low hum of engines where none should be. He grabbed his rifle, calm but alert. Ty was already awake, boots on, as if his instincts had never stopped listening. He met Jack at the door. They exchanged no words. They didn't need to. Amy, holding Lindy close in her room, felt the weight of it, the final reckoning. She kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "You're safe. I promise." Then she stood and grabbed her phone, ready to call for help if needed. but it didn't come to that point. 3 men crossed into the back pasture. They weren't dressed like locals. Their steps were fast, sharp. They moved like they didn't care who saw them. One carried a crowbar. Another had something that looked too much like a weapon for comfort. Ty didn't wait. He walked straight into the dark with only a flashlight in hand. Jack watched from the fence, his rifle ready, but Ty had asked for this moment alone. "No more running," he'd said. "It ends here." The flashlight beam cut through the night. "The men stopped, looking for me?" Ty called out. The men froze, then laughed. One stepped forward. "You shouldn't have come back." Ty's voice was steady. "No. But I did. And I'm not leaving." It was the way he said it. Not like a challenge, but like a fact. A truth grounded in fire and pain and love. These men weren't facing a victim. They were facing a man who had already lost everything, and survived. Amy appeared behind him, hands shaking but eyes full of courage. "If you're here to threaten my family, you're not walking off this land." The tension shattered when red and blue lights flooded the field. Lou had called the authorities. The moment Amy stepped out, police swarmed in like ghosts from the trees, quiet but swift. The men didn't fight. They knew it was over. By sunrise, the danger was gone. The pasture was quiet again. But everything had changed. Back at the house, Ty sat on the porch with Amy. Lindy played nearby, laughing, unaware of how close fear had crept to their door. Amy leaned her head against Ty's shoulder. For the first time, there was no wall between them. No grief, no lies. Just breath. Just skin. Just peace. "I spent so long dreaming of coming home," Ty said softly. "But I never imagined it would hurt this much." Amy smiled gently. "Home isn't just a place, Ty. It's who's waiting for you when you return." He turned to look at her, his eyes full of hope. "So, are you still waiting?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, an old photo of the two of them from their wedding. "Wrinkled, faded, but never forgotten. I never stopped," she said. "Even when I thought you were gone, some part of me waited." They sat in silence, watching the sun rise over the ranch. The pain hadn't vanished. The scars were still there. But scars don't mean love is broken. They mean it healed. Later that morning, Amy led Ty and Lindy to the hill where his memorial stone had stood for years. Quietly, with care, they removed it together, not to forget, but to mark a new beginning, a new life, a new chapter. And so, Heartland did what it always did best. It held the broken pieces and turned them into something whole again. Ty Borden was home, and this time, he wasn't going anywhere.